Joan and Rick Francolini are the parents of a bisexual daughter, Renee, who's about to marry a transgender man. They're also committed social justice advocates who recently organized the first ever Lower Cape Pride celebration on Cape Cod. Dubbed Unity in Community, the three-day event, a multi-generational celebration of LGBTQ+ pride, drew hundreds of people to the towns of Orleans and Brewster, Massachusetts in June 2025. Activities included a parade, an LGBTQ+ community resource fair, musical performances, a panel discussion, and an exhibit about the history of drag. As Joan and Rick tell PFLAG Cape Cod's Rick Koonce in this interview, the couple got the idea for the event after seeing the transformative impact of small-town pride celebrations in Maine, where their daughter and her fiancé live. They noticed that those events brought visibility, joy, and solidarity to the queer community there. As committed LGBTQ+ allies, Joan and Rick soon realized that Lower Cape Cod needed a pride event of its own, separate from traditional pride activities held each year in Provincetown. Planning Lower Cape Pride quickly became a labor of love for both Joan and Rick, who tapped many elements of their local community to support the event. Over the course of several months, they brought together neighbors, LGBTQ+ volunteers, local business people, political and civic leaders, artists, musicians, and others to make Lower Cape Pride a crowd-pleasing event, far exceeding what either Joan or Rick had initially anticipated. Joan and Rick Francolini, welcome to Profiles in LGBTQ+ Courage. It's so good to have you on the show today.
Good to be here.
Ditto.
I am so pleased to be talking with both of you. The two of you have just recently and very successfully organized and run the first ever Lower Cape Pride event here on Cape Cod. And I'd like us to talk a little bit about how you got involved with this activity and how you pulled together a huge cadre of people, volunteers, participants to make this thing a success. So which of you would like to begin that conversation?
My wife is looking at me. I guess it's me. It was very much inspired by our children, Renee and our future son-in-law, Max. Both are members of the queer community. They live in a small town in Maine, Bath, and they had taught us the importance of small town prides, which were emerging more and more in their areas. It wasn't just about New York and LA and Chicago, but it was about your own community coming together. And it was very meaningful for them. And they told us that if we did it on Cape Cod, people would show up. And damn, they were correct.
They were. And Joan, both you and Rick have backgrounds in marketing and sales. So talk about what you did to stand up this first ever event and make it the success that it was.
What made it a success were the people that got involved. And I think when Rick first spoke about this, it was a year ago in July, and then it sort of laid dormant for a little while about taking action. And then with the change in the political winds, all of a sudden we had a lot of friends who came out to support it. We had acquaintances who called us and said, we want to be involved. And we had our first kickoff meeting in December. We had over 40 people attend on Zoom of all ages. And it was amazing. I mean, people really felt the urge to become a supporter of it, whether you were part of the queer community or you were an ally of the community. And since Rick and I were very involved in a lot of organizations and had a lot of relationships, that helped tremendously. And that was a success. Yes, our background in marketing and sales did help, especially Rick's background in sales. He makes a lot of cold calls, but it did help.
I remember when he called me.
He did, yeah. He calls everyone. He doesn't take no for an answer the first time. And I think what made it successful was finding out that we had such a vibrant community of LGBTQ plus people in Orleans. I mean, and we didn't know this. And getting associated with PFLAG helped. And the more people we talked to, the more people who said, this is so important right now. And so the dedication of those people was what really made it a success.
And I was amazed to see how quickly you were able to galvanize so many people. How is it that you were able, now you're a married, straight, retired couple, how did you know what levers to pull, what calls to make this event come together?
Well, Joan referenced that kickoff meeting, which happened very early in December, and that was just a gauge to see if people would actually show up. A lot of folks expressed interest, but are they going to show up? They did show up, and so we knew that right after the holidays, we needed to jump into gear. We followed up that Zoom meeting with an in-person potluck gathering at our home. In January. And once again, nearly 40 attendees, young and old, across the spectrum, straight and queer. And it was clear that people were serious about getting it done and willing to roll up their sleeves. We had a plan for that meeting. We talked about the vision. We broke out into breakout groups. We established a communications team, a financial team. It was a little bit of our corporate roots surfacing, I suppose, from an organizational standpoint. But, we got organized that January, and then it snowballed from there.
Since we both come from corporate, and people have said they've never seen anything so organized. I did run big groups and big teams for corporate America. And it was more of that and organizing than it was my marketing skills. And it was letting people do the jobs they signed up for, having some check-ins on what's going on, giving the freedom to people to organize how they needed to, but also then coming together as core leaders of teams. There were some really great things that happened. One was really building the younger people in the community got their friends involved. And that was really critical because they did all the new social media things that, we're not as apt to and super talented on those regards. And that was critical because if it was left to us, that would have faltered by the side. And people who had skill sets used their skill sets and they didn't let us down. Everyone was just beyond helpful. And we had other people asking what more they could do. And so it was truly, truly spectacular.
I think managing volunteers is a bit of an art, and some people do not do it well. You two clearly did. What do you find, and this is, I think, advice for anyone else who might want to organize a similar event of their own in their own neighborhood or community, how do you manage volunteers successfully and empower them, but also kind of keep a coherent focus to the effort?
I think one of the things that happened very early on, which Joan and I focused on and were successful with, is that we quickly raised a pretty significant amount of money through a couple of grant applications and some generous donations. And the fact that we were able to report that to the group and the fact that the group knew that this was real and that, we had the finances and demonstrated to them that, they could actually take on these projects and here's a budget to do it with, and here's the money for the police detail and here's the money for all the parade decorations that you might need. I think that not only empowered people, but it made them feel as though it was very real very quickly. And so we're so grateful for the support that we got from a few of the organizations early on that allowed for that.
We also made it clear that we're retired. We have a lot of time. And that if other people were working and they felt like they needed to bail because things became more important, that was okay. Just let us know what situation you're in. But the fact that the Cape does have so many retired people who really support this, and they made this a prime focus of what needed to get done. And then they brought other people in as they saw a need set. And that was really managing volunteers. We didn't manage the day-to-day volunteers. We actually sort of organized the leaders of their specific groups. And so we were able to say there's a parade committee and there's a communications committee and there's an outreach committee. And those leaders did a phenomenal job. And they would be able to call us to say, hey, I'm having some trouble. I need some more volunteers. And we had a volunteer lead. That was smart. So, those volunteer leads are the ones that really found volunteers and managed them. And everyone had a job and everyone led it as though it was they were getting paid for it. And that was really spectacular. I also think we had check-ins set up. We did a lot of emails. We never said no. If someone said, hey, I'm thinking of this idea, it might cost some money. We said, yeah, that would be a great idea. Bring in other people as you see fit. So it worked out better than we could have ever expected.
We were also very respectful of time. You know, folks are super busy, and many of these people actually were working. You know, we were fortunate to be retired. They were not. We had our Zoom meetings, and we tried like hell to get them done in 60 minutes. You know, we didn't overschedule them. We, you know, once every 3 or 4 weeks to check in at key times as we were moving along. But respect for time is important.
Again, it's about how you manage the volunteer force. And we'll talk, if you would, about the various components of the 3-day event, because I think that will be of interest to people. And there was really an arc of activities and areas of focus. So
it was supposed to start small.
Yes.
That didn't work out.
I think how it kicked off was, yes, it was supposed to be small. And then connection was made through Cape Rep, and Cape Rep volunteered their space. And so you had to do that because it was an amazing space.
Theater on Cape Cod in Brewster.
Of people that came together. And then the churches wanted to get involved, and that brought a lot of people. And so it started building. The Council on Aging in Orleans was doing a dinner for the past 10 years for the community, and they wanted to expand it. And then we thought, oh, drag would be great. And we reached out to a friend of ours who used to be in P-Town. Now he's in Arizona. He connected us with someone. And it kicked off with an event at Snow Library, which was an art exhibit. It was the most well-attended day of a kickoff for an art exhibit.
In Orleans.
In Orleans. We had over 20 artists submit artwork. It was everything that the weekend ended up being was this kickoff event. It was affirming. It had allies. It had people of the community. It was celebratory. People made connections there of other people they didn't know. So it kicked off with that. We had other library programs. Then we had the dinner at the Council on Aging. Then there was a drag event at the Alley. And then the next day in Orleans, then there was the parade in Orleans with the ending ceremony in Orleans, which you had to bring together because there was dignitaries of the town
Not
there.
to mention the kickoff at the Village Green before the parade with entertainment and face painting and the like.
Right. And then
we
went
couple of
to
Grand Marshals.
Grand Marshals, which was amazing. And those actually helped our parade so much, the whole stories of the Grand Marshals. And then we had events at Cape Rep, 4 different events at Cape Rep, plus a whole thing going on at the barn with activities there. And then the next day was a lot of religious places had services.
And I will chime in for 1 second about the parade because FYI, you know, the parade was never on my radar screen until early on. One of the Orleans selectmen said, we've got to have a parade. We've got to march down Main Street. I'm like, really? And we're like, all right, you know, you're a select person. You help us get it done. You help us make it happen. We'll do it.
I think the other thing is that we being the core team, Rick and I, owned the whole thing. The town supported us, but this was not run by the town. And so we were able to say, no, this is when we would like the parade. And this is not to drive business to the town. This is supporting the community. This is what it was all about. I know, and we didn't take corporate sponsorships. We did get a grant from a couple of corporations, but it wasn't that they sponsored anything. And so it was very grassroots. It was people powered the entire way. And I think that's also what made it so special.
Yeah. Talk about the people who were the Grand Marshals, because that was sort of a fortuitous opportunity.
Yeah, that was huge. That was a function of, you know, back to the sales guy knocking on doors and talking to people. You know, just through connections and word of mouth, we learned that Gloria and Linda Bailey Davies lived in Orleans and were also plaintiffs in the lawsuit, against the state of Massachusetts that resulted in gay marriage in the state. And when I learned that, I was blown away. I mean, my corporate PR, lights went off and I was like, this is like a silver bullet. I mean, these guys, if they would be our Grand Marshals, that is going to be so PRable and so exciting. And I just, in my heart, I felt that very few people in our community probably knew that we had celebrities like this, frankly, living amongst us. And certainly they were known within their circles and their community, but there was a much larger community to reach out to. And we got to know them, spoke to them, offered them the Grand Marshal opportunity if we could pull it off, and they said they would, and it was great.
And then we also went to the gala that PFLAG hosted, and that was critical. We brought a table of young people with us, but also we sat at a table with the partner of the oldest living Stonewall veteran. And although they weren't
David Bermudez and Bob Isidore.
And
Yes.
although they weren't the Grand Marshals, they brought so much joy to people. And there was a group of high school kids from Sturgis who came to one of the events, and I said, oh, yes, they're here. And he said, I'm doing a report on them. Can I meet them? I mean, the connections that were made were...
Yes. And you had local political leaders. Julian Sear was there.
Yeah, Hadley Luddy was there. Julian Sear was there. Kevin Galligan, our selectman, was there, which was fabulous. And they were all so visibly, literally inspired and touched by it all. It was just so in their community and very special.
I think what made it special was the personal connections. They were there as, yes, representatives, but they told their personal stories. And it did not seem slick. It did not seem like they were trying to sell something. They really were truthful about why this was so important to them as people, and then how it reflected the community at large.
And one quick point about the gala, because the other connection we made at the gala, which was fabulous, was we met a woman who owned a cute little Volkswagen white convertible Bug, and she offered it to us for our Grand Marshals. And we took her name and we called her back the next week, and, our Grand Marshals rode in that Bug, and she drove it all the way in from Bourne or somewhere.
I think the other thing the gala did for us is we made connections, and that's all about
The Gala Ball, which is held each year on Cape Cod.
right. And we made connections with the people at Thrive and with the health service, I forgot the name.
The Cape and Islands Transgender.
Right. And so all those people, and then all the churches that we're not religious people, and just knowing how many churches were going to be involved, not just in Orleans, but they came from all over.
It was Unitarian Universalists. It was Episcopalians. It was other...
Federated.
Okay. Yeah.
Which they brought so much joy to this program. I mean, it just, they rallied like never before. And so meeting all of them and using those connections, and it wasn't a sales. It was they wanted to get involved. How can I reach you? Sending us texts and emails. It was...
And having grown up Catholic, who knew how welcoming churches could actually be?
Right, exactly.
If I could pivot now, this is wonderful. And of course, you all are really out there as allies to the LGBTQ plus community. And I'd like to talk more about that in terms of its importance now, given our toxic political environment. And as we're recording this, the Supreme Court is taking action to support the administration in singling out and kicking out transgender members of the military, among other things. Transgender health is under attack. So talk to me, both of you, if you would, about what you see as the importance of allyship nowadays, and how will the two of you be involved in those efforts going forward?
When you saw who showed up for the parade, there were so many people that were allies, and people that have realized their coworkers, their neighbors, their friends' kids are all part of this community. And we have a very good friend who originally said, I just support everyone. I don't really know anyone as part of this community. And his wife said, no, there's this person, this person, this person, this person. And all of a sudden you realize he wasn't doing it he just didn't care. He supports everyone, and that's the world you want to live in. And so, getting out there and not being afraid is really important, because the more people you have saying, this is not the way we're going to treat people, whether it's allies of this or what they're doing to immigrants right now, a different story. But, it's the same thing. It's victimizing people that is just unreal. And so, it's really important to stand up for what you believe in. We had retailers that really wanted to get involved. We had flags that were calling us to say, can we get one of your flags out there? Can we keep the presence out there? And so allies have to be a critical part of this, because it's the only way to get the masses in support of
get the traction. that you need. Yeah.
Yeah. And, allyship is something that I think about a lot. I think it's, going forward, it's one of the most critical pieces of the puzzle that we need to crack as Lower Cape Pride. I think there are huge numbers of allies out there. How do we mobilize them? What can we do that will bring the greatest value to the members of the queer community that we want to support? And those are questions that are, I'm in the process of wrestling with as we speak.
I think one thing, we talked about moving allies to advocates, and I think that's the path we have to go down.
From allies to advocates, getting involved, skin in the game.
Correct.
Yes.
It's the only way we're going to move forward.
I have to ask you, this strikes very close to home for two of you. You have a bisexual daughter. She's soon to marry a trans man. And so this is very personal for you. Do you all have a perspective on why the animus today against members of the LGBTQ plus community, and in particular, the demonization by this administration of transgender people? Do you have thoughts on that? Do you ruminate or marinate on why this has come now?
My general feeling about folks who are questionable when it comes to supporting the transgender community, as an example, is that, for the most part, I don't think they have actually developed relationships with them. I think it's a lack of experience. I don't want to call it ignorance, but it's just a lack of exposure. I knew nothing about transgender individuals until I began to be educated by my daughter, and then in a huge way by my future son-in-law. And, I've learned so much about the struggles that they endure, about the importance of authenticity to their lives. And, once you get sensitized to that and educated to that, it makes it much easier to be welcoming. And I just wish we could facilitate that on some sort of a grander scale.
I think I go deeper in the fact that there's still queer kids getting kicked out of their houses. There's still a very strong religious right that does not want to accept the queer community. And it's making traction. I mean, they're against women's rights. They're against transgender rights, queer rights, you name it. Anything that's not straight and white, they don't want to be part of. And so that is a big thing that's getting focused now in religious liberty, in the name of religious liberty. The most disturbing Supreme Court case just now was that you have the right to opt out of having your kid learn about LGBTQ rights if they're reading a book about it. You know what? It is going to be so hard for schools to now say, let me read a book about this, about your neighbor, about what's allowed in the right now, which is gay marriage. But we're not going to talk about it in school anymore because it's too hard to send out a note to tell parents they could pull their kids out of learning about this. This is a fundamental right of people's, and now their kids are going to be indoctrinated that this is not the right thing to do. This is not how people should live. And so to me, that's a very big concern. As people wanted to meet people in this community, they could easily, but they don't want to.
Yeah. Having had this experience, having been on this journey, learning about the transgender world, talk a little bit about, for the two of you, the journey that you took as parents with Renee. And it's been an evolving journey, right? Talk a little bit about raising her and your experience of that, and bring us up to the moment, to the point at which she's soon to be married to a transgender man.
We raised her. We didn't know that she was queer. I mean, she was part of the Gay and Straight Alliance. She was part of marching band. She was part of math club, science league, you name it. And we didn't care what she was. And she came out to us in college, and she basically said, no, I have a girlfriend. Just think about it and come back and talk to me. Don't ask. I ask a lot of questions. She said, Mom, don't ask me any questions. And I think at the beginning, we were a little surprised that it was so hard to come out. We think we're so liberal and understanding. And we were like, wow, she couldn't tell us. And you realize how hard it was for her to come out to us. And then you think about other kids who have parents that are not accepting and how hard that has to be. And so since she was in college, she's had girlfriends, she's had boyfriends, she's had the whole gamut. And it's been, a lesson. Sometimes we have to say, so what does this mean? What happens here? And, to us, it's just accepting everyone as they are. And so.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's always been interesting to see how much she enjoys gravitating towards the queer community because of the fact that she's explained to me that it's a community where she can really completely be herself. And that importance is something that I never fully appreciated, but I am certainly appreciating more and more as I see the evolution of their community up in Maine. And that doesn't mean that it's an exclusive community, but it's a very important one to them.
And, she has an older sister who lives in New Orleans who is very supportive of the community, and she has a business and she supports this community at her business. And it's very tough in a red state like Louisiana to support this. And she's like, it's not political, it's social. And so we were both raised by very liberal-leaning Democratic families, and that helps tremendously also. And I have a mom who's now 93, and she moved here. She was 87, and we were up in P-Town, and there was a transgender display, and she looks around the room, and she says, very loudly, I'm thinking, oh no, what is she going to say? She says, who cares where these people go to the bathroom? They all use my bathroom in my house. And that's how we grew up. And Rick's mom, the same way. And so to us, this is just core to what you believe in.
Yeah, and you asked a little bit about the evolution as we, watch the kids and evolve with them. And obviously, once Max got introduced to our lives, one of the things that I
Your future son-in-law.
Yeah. Yes, our future son-in-law. One of the things I so appreciated was the fact that, Renee was so candid about talking about it and explaining it to us and frankly schooling us, because we did have a lot of questions because there's a lot to learn. And that was only, and that ante was upped once we got to know Max because he was so open and willing to, explain and just, again, educate us. It's a very communicative relationship. There's no concerns about sharing and answering questions. And so that's what's been so inspiring to have been so educated by your kids.
Yeah. And what do you think is the biggest misperception, let's say, of transgender people in your experience?
That they're doing harm, that they're less than, that they're not full members of society. You talk about the band and the army and the military, horrific. I mean, they're serving the country. They're doing what they want. I think it's a small percentage of people that are now becoming under the microscope for lives they want to live.
That they're deviants that are going to do crude things in bathrooms. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's disinformation. And so what would be, just a couple more questions, what's your advice to other parents who may be at the point of just discovering that they have a child who is a member of the queer community? What would be your advice to them? Joan, start with you.
I think they should go to a PFLAG meeting. I think that it's a great way to meet other parents if you're having questions. We've met some great parents there who really didn't know where else to go, and it's super supportive, and they have so many resources, and it makes you feel part of a community. I think having conversations with your child, with your adult, with anyone, with their friends, honest conversations about their challenges and what you could do to help, and just listen.
Yeah, and I would agree with that as far as PFLAG and the fact there are so many, there's a tremendous amount of support in the community for the LGBTQ universe. The nonprofits, the churches, and we discover that through, getting to know them. And it's really important to find those people and to realize that you are not alone, that there are many others who have endured this and gone through it. And there are many others who very much want to, support you and help you through it.
And I would say get involved. I mean, they're cutting services now that need people to help with. They're cutting the suicide hotlines for the LGBT community. Like, what can you do there? What can you do in your town? What's your church doing? You're flying a flag. Are you voting the way you should be voting? So as your prime way of voting, what are you supporting? Support your families in need. Have conversations with other people that are not believing the same way you believe, and, get them to understand what's going on if you can. I mean,
just have a conversation.
Correct.
Yeah. And, one of the themes that came out over our weekend, and I don't remember who said it, but they had said that, we're not here to change people's minds necessarily, but we would like to open those minds. And I think that's a hurdle that we can clear if we figure out how to do that.
Well, Joan and Rick, it's been great to talk with you today. Is there anything that has kind of popped into mind as we've been talking that I haven't asked you specifically about, but that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I would just say you could do this in your small community. It really takes a village, but find the right people. Start having small events, whether it's a dinner, whether it's at a church, whether it's at a bar or a coffee house. I mean, we're throwing around ideas for what's next. Is it, make it all inclusive, because you want the allies and everyone to come around, but make it a focus and make it happen.
Yeah, and I would say, certainly a couple of things we are thinking that we want to have. Pride Month is very important. June is Pride Month. That's extremely important. But we need to have pride permeate throughout the year. And we are very much thinking in terms of, modest gatherings on a regular basis to keep the community connected and to continue to inspire and to build momentum. I also think the message I would share is that I am personally very interested in trying to figure out how to leverage the potential that allies have in the community. And if there are any allies out there listening or any members of the queer community that have suggestions for their allies, contact us. lowercapepride.org. That's the website.
Say again?
lowercapepride.org.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, Joan and Rick Francolini, thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been a pleasure to have you here on Profiles in LGBTQ plus Courage.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Rick Koonce.
Thank you for listening to today's interview. Founded in 1973, PFLAG is the first and largest organization for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people and their parents, families, friends, and allies. We have over 400 chapters and more than 200,000 members and supporters nationwide. Our members come from every generation and live in cities, small towns, and rural areas across the United States. PFLAG is committed to creating a world where diversity is celebrated and all people are respected, valued, and affirmed. For more information about PFLAG, explore the rest of this website or visit PFLAG National at pflag.org.